The train shrieked like a dying thing before it came to a stop, iron wheels hissing against dry track. The woman stepped down from the last car, her boots touching cracked earth like a prayer unanswered. Her dress, plain blue calico, had been scrubbed clean that morning, stitched carefully where moths had found it in storage. A brown leather valise hung from her hand. Her gloves, once white, had long turned the color of ash. She paused under the sun's punishing eye and raised her chin to meet the town. The station was hardly more than a leaning shack nailed together from crooked planks. A rusted bell hung crooked above its doorway, trembling in the wind but never ringing. The town behind it, Dustwater, Montana, looked like it had been born bitter and stayed that way. Dry, split-wood buildings crouched low against the plains, their paint scabbed off like old skin. A dog barked once, then was silent. No one moved to greet her. But she had seen this before. Every journey west taught her the same lesson: hope, then hesitation, then the weight of being seen. A man stood across the platform, wide shoulders, dust-colored coat, straw hat pulled low over eyes that, even from this distance, narrowed the second he saw her face.
He didn't speak.
Didn't smile. Just turned, stiff, and walked away. She followed him with her gaze, not her feet. In her pocket was his letter, folded carefully, softened at the edges. The words inside had been full of aching kindness. Asterisk, I want a woman who knows struggle, who don't need prettifying. Someone to share the silence with. Asterisk, the words had seemed real when she first read them, months ago, lit by a low fire and loneliness. Now they meant nothing. Two old men leaning against a rail post watched her without blinking. One spat into the dust. The other shook his head, slow and full of warning, like something had spoiled in the air. She exhaled through her nose, slow, not surprised, just tired. She began walking, away from the station, past the still-watching men, into the middle of the town. The saloon's batwing doors groaned when she pushed through them. Heat, sweat, and smoke rushed her like a crowd. For a moment no one noticed. Then the piano player stopped. Chairs scraped. Voices hushed. She walked to the bar. The barkeep looked at her like she was an insect that had learned to speak. She set a coin on the wood.
Water, she said.
He didn't move.
Didn't blink.
Just kept cleaning the same glass with the same dirty rag. A bead of sweat rolled down her temple. She did not repeat herself. After a long silence, the barkeep gave a grin. Not kind, not even cruel, just dead. Try the river. She took the coin back and turned. Laughter, low and scattered, rose behind her as she stepped back into the sunlight. The wind kicked up, dry and mean, tossing grit into her eyes. She didn't flinch, just kept walking. At the edge of town, where buildings thinned into broken fences and wild brush, she found a spot. A ring of stones suggested a forgotten fire once burned here. She dropped her valise, brushed her skirt smooth, and sat. Not with defeat, but calculation. Shade was thin. The prairies stretched out like a wound, flat, endless, buzzing with unseen insects. She removed her gloves slowly. Her hands were scarred in places, palms calloused. She laid the gloves across her knees and sat still as stone, letting the land speak to her. Somewhere behind her, a door creaked on its hinges. Somewhere farther, a child cried once, then was hushed. She did not cry. Not yet. At dusk, she built a fire. Small, careful, like every fire she had ever made, tight as memory, contained as grief. The flames licked upward, dancing low. She boiled beans in a black tin pot. No salt, just heat and patience. She did not look up when she felt eyes on her. She let the silence stretch. The man stood beyond the firelight, on the edge of shadow and wind. His coat was darker now, soaked in fading sun. The straw hat still low over his eyes. He held something in one hand. She met his gaze without speaking. He stepped forward and set a tin pail on the ground beside her. Water sloshed inside. Then he turned, walked back into the dusk. The woman stirred her beans and did not thank him. She watched the fire reflect in the water surface. It danced like a lie. Night crawled over the prairie slow and mean. Coyotes cried far off. Wind tugged at her skirt, pulled loose strands of hair from her braid.
Still she sat.
Sleep was not what she sought. Stillness was. The next morning, she rose early like always, rebuilt the fire from coals, boiled the rest of the water, ate the beans cold, washed her face in silence. The town did not return. By noon, she began walking. Not toward the train station. That was behind her. She walked away from town, toward the low hills she'd seen in the distance. The sun followed, heavy and hot. Her shadows stretched long. She reached a split-rail fence, then a burned-out homestead. The porch was collapsed, but the chimney stood like a grave marker. She sat there a while, under the skeleton of what had been someone's home. Footsteps. She turned.
Same man.
Closer now. She could see the stubble on his jaw, the faded scar down his cheek. He didn't smile. "You'll get snakebit out here," he said. She looked at him, expression unchanged. "You got a name?" he asked. She didn't answer. He nodded, like that was fair. Looked down at the broken porch. Back up at her. "There's a barn west of here."
Mine.
Dry roof. No questions. She held his gaze. "You want it," he said. "You'll find it." He walked away again. She waited until he was gone. Then she stood. She watched the horizon a long time. And then she walked toward it. The barn stood like a slouched sentinel on the edge of a grassless ridge, its wood sun-bleached and silvered with age. She approached at dusk, boots kicking small puffs of dust that never quite reached her hem. A hawk wheeled high above, shadows slicing across the hardpan earth. She didn't rush. No one had invited her. Not really. But the man's words had lingered like smoke. Inside, the barn was cooler than expected, thick with the smell of hay, old sweat, and the copper hint of rust. Beams stretched above her like ribs, holding up a roof patched with tin and tarred cloth. Sunlight filtered in through narrow gaps, casting long golden stripes across the floor. A horse in one of the stalls snorted and shifted, then settled again. It was quiet in a way she trusted. She set her valise down in the loft, where a saddle blanket lay folded beside a canteen and an oil lantern. Signs of preparation. The man had known she'd come. She didn't thank him aloud. But she sat on the blanket and let herself exhale for the first time in days. At night, she lay listening. The barn creaked softly in the wind, but it held its shape. Mice rustled under hay. The horse muttered in sleep. Somewhere far off, thunder rolled, a slow, tumbling growl that never quite came close. By morning, the world was different. A gray mist hung over the land like a veil. The sun behind it was a pale coin, cold and half-spent. She stepped out and saw him at the fence line, hammering a crooked post back into the ground. He didn't look up. She walked to the trough and washed her face with water gone warm and stale. The metal bit her hands, but she didn't flinch. When she turned, he was gone. Later, she found him in the fields with his sleeves rolled up, wrists and forearms stained with dirt. He worked like the land owed him something, and he meant to collect. "You fix things?" he asked without looking at her. She blinked. "Sometimes." He nodded once. Handed her a busted lantern from the barn. "Wick's gone. Maybe more." She took it, sat on the step of the cabin she hadn't yet entered, and began to work. They didn't talk that day, not in ways that counted. But he brought her bread and a jar of beans at sundown, then left before she could return the plate. That night, it rained. She woke to the hush of water sliding down the barn roof and the sharp scent of wet hay. Thunder cracked once, close, and the horse startled, hooves clattering briefly before calming again. She rose and moved to the loft window. The prairie outside shimmered, dark and slick and strange, like it was washing itself clean. By morning, he was waiting. He stood outside the barn, holding a lantern. She handed it to him silently. "Fixed," she said. His eyes flicked up, met hers for one heartbeat. "You sleep all right?" he asked. She shrugged. "That loft's older than sin." Surprised it didn't drop you through the floor. It held. He nodded, turned, and walked back to the cabin.
3 days passed like that.
She stayed in the barn, mending tools he left out without asking, boiling coffee over coals, watching storms build on the horizon and then break without warning. He worked the fields, fed the animals, spoke when necessary but never without weight. Their silences grew heavy but not hostile, more like stone warming in the sun. Then came the girl. It was near sunset when she appeared, barefoot, dress torn, face streaked with dirt. She came running through the brush like something chased her, though nothing followed. The woman heard the child's breath before she saw her. Ragged.
Scared.
She stepped out of the barn just as the girl stumbled at the fence line. "Hey," the woman said, soft but firm. The child froze. Big eyes. Brown skin several shades lighter than hers. A cut across one cheek. Hair tangled and wild. "You hurt?" The girl didn't answer. Just looked past her, toward the hills. "You alone?" Still silence. The woman took a step forward. The girl didn't run. She crouched low, offered a hand. "You can rest. That's all. Just rest." It took a long time, but finally, the girl crossed the fence and walked into her arms like she belonged there. The man found them sitting under the barn's overhang. The girl asleep, head in the woman's lap. Rain threatened again. Thunder closer this time.
He didn't speak for a while.
Just stood there, watching. "Don't know her," she said quietly. He nodded. "She's run from something." "Likely," he said. "Could be she's mixed." His jaw tightened just slightly. "That a problem?" He shook his head once. "Not for me." She looked down at the girl, smoothing hair from her brow. "Town won't say the same." "I ain't town." He turned, walked into the cabin, came back with a blanket and half a loaf of bread. The three of them slept in the barn that night. In the loft, the woman laid the girl down on her side, pulled the blanket up to her chin. The man sat against a beam with his back to them, one hand resting on his knee, the other on the rifle beside him. Just in case. The woman watched him as lightning lit the sky behind the slats, sharp and blue-white. He looked carved from stone, but she could see the storm in his shoulders. "She yours?" she asked.
No.
Could have been. He didn't answer, but something in his silence said yes. Rain fell steady through the night. The girl whimpered once in sleep, and the woman whispered her calm again. The man never moved. When dawn came, he looked at them both.
"She can stay," he said.
"And me?" the woman asked. He met her eyes. No smile, no warmth, but no rejection. "You already are." The girl's name came slowly, spoken in a whisper one morning, just after sunup, when the woman sat combing tangles from her hair with fingers and oil. A name barely louder than breath, but it rooted itself between them, a sprout in the scorched soil. She didn't press for more. Children told stories on their own time. The man, he spoke less than ever.
He watched.
Listened.
Worked.
The fields bore signs of his rhythm, rose straight and deep, like someone meant to stay. The barn stood taller now, too, its leaning frame patched where the woman had worked alongside him, handing nails and holding timber while the girl played in the dust below. They were becoming something shapeless still, but real. She saw it in the way the girl reached for his hand now. Saw it in the way his gaze softened, just a flicker, when the child laughed. In the quiet way, he always made sure there was enough bread for two small mouths before taking his own. And yet the land didn't forget. It held silence like a threat. One afternoon, as the heat broke into wind, a rider came. Not fast. Not loud. Just steady, hooves like slow thunder across the plain. The woman saw him first, a silhouette against the sun. Long coat, rifle slung behind the saddle, hat rim pulled low. He wasn't from Dustwater. She knew that by the way the horse moved, no town-tied animal, this one. It came from miles beyond. She stood outside the barn, hands still coated with grease from fixing the pump. The man stepped beside her after a moment, wordless. The rider stopped 20 paces off, raised 2 fingers in greeting. "Evening," he said, voice dry as gravel. "I'm looking for a girl. About ya high. Half-blood." went missing 6 days back from a wagon train near Fort Silas. The girl had come to the barn door, small fingers gripping the edge. The woman stepped half in front of her without thinking. "She don't belong to no wagon," the man said. "That's so?" the rider asked. He shifted in the saddle. "Folks in Silas say different. Say she was property." "She ain't." The rider smiled, thin and wrong. "Law says she is. Bought and paid for." The man didn't move. The woman could feel his breath, slow and careful. The girl whimpered. The rider's hand hovered near the butt of his pistol. "Look, I don't want blood. Just the girl. Y'all give her up quiet, I ride out." The silence that followed was not empty. It pressed against skin, thick and hot. The man spoke low. "She's under my roof now. That roof don't beat writ and coin. I don't answer to coin." The rider's smile slipped. "I ain't come alone." That was when the second man showed. Rifle raised, crouched on the ridge behind them. Had been there long enough to aim. The woman saw him first. Her body tensed. "Ridge," she whispered. The man turned, eyes flicking to the horizon. 1 beat.
2.
Then he moved. Faster than she'd seen him move before, he stepped in front of the girl and raised his rifle. Not at the man in the saddle, at the one on the ridge. Thunder cracked. Not from the sky. The second man's shot missed, by a hair, or perhaps by intention. The man's bullet did not. A shape fell from the ridge, kicking dust. The rider's horse reared. "Damn you," he snarled. "You drew first," the man replied. Another shot. The woman had moved by then, dragging the girl inside the barn, heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She watched through a crack in the slats. The rider circled, trying to draw the man away. But the man didn't move. He stayed rooted, still as stone, barrel tracking every twitch. "You'll hang for this," the rider spat. "Not today." The rider spat, turned, and galloped east. Kicking dust. Kicking defeat. The man didn't follow. Inside the barn, the woman held the girl tight. Neither of them spoke. The child shook, but didn't cry. Not this time. That night, the man buried the body from the ridge. He didn't ask for help. She watched from a distance, lantern light glowing faint on the rise. The girl sat beside her, small hand curled around her wrist. "He killed for us," the girl whispered. "No," the woman said. "He killed for justice." "That's different." The wind didn't agree or argue. It just whistled past, dragging the scent of blood and rain. Later in the loft, the girl finally slept. The woman lay awake, listening. She thought about the man's face, how he had looked afterward. Not angry, not afraid, just old. Like he'd remembered something he'd tried long to forget. When dawn crept through the boards, she found him sitting by the fence, rifle laid across his lap, untouched coffee cooling beside him. She sat next to him without a word. After a long while he spoke. "They'll send more." "I know." She shouldn't run again. "She won't." He looked out at the land, endless and indifferent. "I've done things," he said. "Things I don't speak on. Rode with men who believed bullets made law. Watched places like this burn." She waited. "I thought if I stayed quiet long enough, I'd forget." "You don't forget," she said. "You build something better beside it."
He looked at her then.
For the first time, truly looked. "What is this?" he asked. She didn't smile. "It's a beginning." He looked away, but he nodded. Far off, the sky turned darker than it should have been. Storms brewing where the sun ought to rise. But they stayed seated, side by side. Still. Waiting. Ready. The thunder came back, not in the sky, but in the hooves of a dozen riders cresting the southern bluff at first light. Dust curled in their wake like smoke from a dying fire. No flags. No badges. Just rough shapes outlined by dawn and menace. Hired men or worse. This wasn't about law anymore. The woman saw them first from the loft window, where she'd taken to sleeping with the girl curled against her side like a heartbeat. The child stirred when she tensed, eyes still half dreaming. "Get dressed," the woman whispered. "Now." She was already moving, heart pacing hard, and even, not like fear, more like readiness. She pulled on her boots, tied her hair back, grabbed the small pistol she kept tucked in the feed barrel. Not much use against rifles, but better than nothing. Outside, the barn door swung open to meet Dawn's cold breath. The man was already at the fence line, saddle cinched, rifle strapped to his back. He turned at the sound of her boots in gravel. "Riders," she said, though he didn't need telling. "They ain't bluffing this time." "No," she agreed. "They're coming to take her, or leave with blood on their hands." His jaw worked. "Then we give them one hell of a mess to carry back." But her gaze shifted to the child now peering from the shadows inside the barn, eyes wide and ancient. "She can't be here." "No time to run," he said. "They'll see." "Not run. Hide." She crouched, taking the girl's face in her hands. "There's a root cellar beneath the far trough. A crawl space, not marked. They won't find it unless they tear the land apart. Stay silent. No matter what." The girl's lip trembled. "Will you come for me?" "Always," the woman said. "Always." She kissed her brow, then nodded to the man, who led the child through the barn's rear shadows. By the time he returned, the riders were nearly at the fence. The lead one wore a gray coat with silver buttons and a pistol belt that gleamed like snake eyes. His beard was white but trimmed neat. He looked like a preacher, but smelled like war. "You the one tooken a thief and a runaway?" he called out. "No thieves here," the man replied. "That's so? Girl's got a bounty now. Owners put coin down for her return. And for the woman with her." The woman stepped forward. "She ain't property." "You say that like it changes things," the preacher said. "But we got paper that says otherwise." "Paper don't bind souls. Paper hangs folks just the same." There was a silence shaped like a noose. "You turn him over," the preacher went on, voice smooth and cruel, "and we ride out. You keep, and your blood waters the prairie." The man looked to her then, not asking permission, confirming loyalty. She nodded once. "You want war," the man called out. "Then step onto this land and call it yours." The first rifle cracked like a whip. The man dropped, rolled behind the trough. Bullet missed by inches. Dust exploded where his head had been. The woman sprinted sideways, pistol already raised. 2 quick shots, clean, deliberate. One man fell screaming. Another ducked behind a horse. Gunfire bloomed like wildfire. Lead tore through the barn's frame, kicked up dirt, pinged off stone. But the man moved like a ghost between shadows, returning fire with precision. He dropped another rider. Then another. She crouched low, feeding bullets into her pistol with shaking fingers. Heart steady, breath calm. She moved toward the cabin, drawing fire away from the barn, away from where the girl waited in silence underground. The preacher rode forward through the smoke, revolver raised. He didn't care who died, only that he won. The man saw him and stepped into the open, rifle braced. He fired once.
Missed.
The preacher turned. The man stepped closer. "You think you're her savior?" the preacher sneered. "You think blood makes you righteous?" "I ain't righteous," the man said. "I'm tired." He fired again. The preacher's hat flew off. Blood streaked his forehead. Not enough to stop him. The preacher raised his gun, and the woman fired. One shot. Straight through the throat. The preacher slumped from his horse like a marionette whose strings had snapped. Dust swallowed his body. Silence followed. The remaining riders looked at one another. No orders left to follow. No pay worth this kind of stand. They turned. One by one. Rode off, scattered like startled cattle. The wind returned. The man dropped his rifle. Hands shaking now. The woman stood unmoving, breath shallow. "We won?" she asked. He gave a dry laugh. "Looks like." He limped toward her, blood on his sleeve, shallow wound, already clotting. She took his arm. Together, they returned to the barn. She pulled open the trapdoor with fingers stiff from gunpowder and fear. The girl looked up at them from the dark, silent as a prayer. "It's over," the woman said. "You're safe." The girl climbed out slowly, and then, without warning, threw her arms around the man's waist. He froze. Then he dropped his hand onto her back, gentle and careful, like she was made of something fragile and true. They stood like that a long time. When the sun rose fully, it lit the barn in gold and ash. Smoke curled from the fields, but the land still breathed. Later that day, they buried the preacher near the creek. No marker. Why bury him at all? The girl asked. The woman looked down at the mound. Because the dead don't change. But the living do. And we're still here. The man placed his hat over his heart, said nothing. That night, the stars were the only sound. They sat on the porch, the three of them, a lantern between them. The girl dozed in the woman's lap, and the man stared out at the dark, where no riders came. You think they'll send more? She asked. And we'll keep her anyway? He nodded. This land's full of ghosts. We don't need to make more. She looked at him, and for the first time, let the word form clearly in her mind. Home. Not the place. Not the soil. The choosing. He turned toward her. There was no smile. But there didn't need to be. Tomorrow would come, and they'd meet it together. Whatever thunder still rolled, they were ready.